And because we have 2 questions from yesterday, I'm going to make good on that promise by starting right off. Ananda Vilas asked, if we originate from the complete, or Sanskrit word is purnam, this was from the invocation of Isopanishad that we recited yesterday. If we originate from the complete whole, from purnam, are we then complete or are we incomplete? Well, the answer is we're also complete, that there is a reflection of the Creator in the creation. But our completeness in this temporal world is covered over. Sometimes Prabhupada gave the analogy of a perfect diamond that has fallen into mud. The diamond still has its complete beauty, but it's covered over. It can't be seen and requires some cleansing, a cleaning away of the mud and dirt. So that cleaning process is the chanting. Mantra is a kind of brushing away of the many, many lifetimes of covering that stand between the world we can perceive and our original true self in its pristine beauty and brilliance. Yadunathan Ekanta Bhakta also asked a question yesterday. Can I connect the dots, they say, as to why, if there is darkness here, there necessarily must be brightness there, and so on. Yes, this refers to the exercise that came with that illustration of the Big Bang. We were looking at the point of 0 plus 1, which is just after the moment of the launching into creation of the cosmos, sometimes called in physics the point of singularity. Our tools of observation and analysis can bring us back to that point, but cannot bring us prior to that point. Whatever happened prior to that moment of singularity is beyond our empiric tools of observation. It's even beyond speculation. What happened beyond that moment preceded the introduction of intelligence into creation. So our intelligence is also limited by that point of origin of the material cosmos. So how do we get to an understanding or a knowledge of what existed prior to the existence of the world we do know? We can use this exercise, that if the material world is temporary, it must come from a place that precedes that temporariness, from a place of eternity. Otherwise, how can temporary be the source of its own existence? There must be some higher state, some order of greater magnitude, some greater dimensional environment that can give rise to the various phenomena of the world around us. So it's an intellectual exercise that if this world is by nature dark, that environment must be by nature bright and luminous, self-luminous. If there is ignorance and not knowing in this world, that point of origin must be a place of full awareness and knowledge. It's known as niti in Sanskrit, in Nyaya philosophy, that if it's not this, then it's that. It's not a perfect way of understanding ultimate reality, but it's a good point of access, and we can discuss more about that. Let me get into today's verse, which is the first mantra of Isopanishad, and I'm going to just call up the PowerPoint here, if you'll bear with me. Share screen. There we go. All right, can you all see that? All right, so this is today's session. This is the third session. Good to see you all. I'm getting some more images of the people who are with us here this evening. Nice to see you all. Forgive me for not calling you all by name. I put this image up because the nature of today's verse is one of, you might say, an environmental appeal, and there's a story that was told by one of my god sisters named Koshalya, that in New Delhi back in the mid-70s, someone said to Prabhupada, this world is not real, it's just an illusion, isn't it? And Prabhupada got very offended by that. He said, how dare you call this world an illusion? This world is beautiful. The mountains are beautiful. The sun and sky are beautiful. The ocean is beautiful. Nature is beautiful. The mountains, the rivers, the trees. It's a beautiful world, he said. Merely temporary. A partial reflection of the eternal world. So if you see the beauty of this world, you will see how the beauty of the spiritual world must be 1,000,000 times more beautiful. It is as if you were looking to paint a painting and you bring it to me and you say, look what I have done for you. And if I looked at your painting and I said, this is just an illusion, would that not hurt your feelings? He said, so I also find it very offensive. When someone says that this world is merely an illusion, it's a slap in the face of Krishna. It's saying that your job is not so great. Your work is not so great. And it's a lack of appreciation for something that's really quite spectacular. I wanted to make sure that because we only have a short time together, that we can get an overview of Isopanishad. So I'm going to go very quickly through the verses. I'm not going to read all 18 verses. The mantras are succinct, very short. I again urge you to go to the text and study it for yourself. But just to give you a sense of what the essence of each mantra is, I've created these short descriptives, if you will. Yesterday we talked about the invocation, that the cause of everything is complete, and therefore the byproducts emerging from that complete point of origin are in themselves also complete. In the first mantra, which we'll recite a little later, it says that because we understand that there's a source to this beautiful manifestation, we should only take as much of it as we need for our own maintenance and not hoard. Another important lesson for our day. The second mantra describes that if you proceed in life with this perspective, then we can live forever here. We will have a peaceful existence in a cooperative world. The third is a rather dramatic image of the opposite, that there are dark places that await those who are unable to appreciate the beauty of the world around them. The fourth mantra is a description of Isa, the Supreme Being, that above the energies of nature, there is a creative source, Isa, or Ishvara, meaning the supreme controller and one who directs the energies of the material creation. The fifth mantra describes the contradictions, that it is said that this Supreme Being walks yet does not walk, speaks yet does not speak, eat yet does not eat. It means that the function of that conscious personal source is more than the material references we have around us. The sixth and seventh mantras encourage the seeker to see that Supreme Being in other beings, and that will alter our behavior. If we begin to respect all life as sacred and as the temple where the Supreme Being resides in the heart. The eighth mantra again describes that Isha has no material body, and that the form of Isha in the heart of all beings is with us from the very beginning of our sojourn in this material world. The ninth mantra, again, somewhat dark imagery, describing that those who invent truths are known as Atmahana, those who waste their own spiritual existence, killers of the soul. Mantras 10 and 11 encourage us to know the world around us, that if we understand the divine nature of the world, we can perceive. Appreciating the miracles that we are capable of perceiving, that will lead us toward the path of understanding the higher miracles, which at this moment are invisible to us. The 12th mantra describes that we have a choice. The more informed choice is to neither pursue exclusively a more comfortable place in this world, nor to consider ourselves to be central to creation. The 13th mantra, like the 10th mantra, describes that the hint of a higher source of knowledge and the need for a teacher to help us come to that place of knowing that higher wisdom. The 14th mantra describes that there is value to learning material knowledge and spiritual knowledge side by side. The world we know is not something to be rejected. That's the Advaita Vedanta philosophy. That this world, Shankara described the material world as a terrible roiling ocean filled with horrible, deadly creatures, and that the world is a place to be transcended. Don't worry about making it better here, just get out. And the way you do that is through austere yoga practice. That's the Shankarite school. The Bhakti school, which is what the Isopanishad is all about, is a slightly more uplifting perspective that in this world, just in that story, for example, of Prabhupada encouraging us to not be indifferent to a painting as a work of art and not call it just an illusion. You can find divinity in the details of the world around you. You don't have to wait for some other heavenly existence. The 15th mantra describes, now we're starting to get into the speaker of Isopanishad imploring, offering this yearning prayer, please remove the effulgence that hides your personal identity from me. And in the last 3 mantras, this seeker, this devotee, admits that now I am at the end of my life. My only desire now is to know you. A little bit like George Harrison's song, My Sweet Lord. The last 2 mantras are prayers at death. Please don't neglect me. Please don't kick me away. Accept me into your service. So again, there's an overview of the 18 mantras and invocation of Isopanishad, and you're welcome to chant this first mantra with me. We reviewed a little bit the Sanskrit diacritics yesterday. In order to save some time, I'm just going to say this line by line myself, and then you're welcome to repeat it with me. The first line is Ishavasyam idam sarvam. Try that with me. Ishavasyam idam sarvam. Yatkincha jagatyam jagat. Let's do that one together. Yatkincha jagatyam jagat. Tena tyaktena bunchita. Tena tyaktena bunchita. Magradakasya svidhanam. Magradakasya svidhanam. So here it is with the melody. Isavasyamidam sarvam. Try that with me. Isavasyamidam sarvam. Yatkincha jagatyam jagat. Yatkincha jagatyam jagat. Tena tyaktena bunjitaha. Tena tyaktena bunjitaha. Magradakasya svidhanam. Very good. Here's the translation. Everything animate or inanimate that is within the universe is controlled and owned by the Lord, Isha or Ishvara. One should therefore accept only those things necessary for himself and set aside as his quota, which are set aside as his quota, and one must not accept other things, knowing well to whom they belong. So for me, this was a kind of environmental code, a way of living in the world. And it reminded me of something I wanted to show you here. Let me see if I can get out of the share mode here. There we go. Hello again. This is a souvenir that I brought back from India. It's a small clay pot. Can you all see that? It's a very simple clay pot. when you go to the marketplaces in India, and if it's a hot day, you might decide to purchase a small little pot like this of some refreshing, cool drink. And then the way this works is this little top that goes right in there to keep it clean and fresh. You'll drink from this little pot, and then you'll throw it on the ground in front of the kiosk and break it. And the reason is, if you look closely, you'll see that many of these little stalls, these refreshment stands, have streams of water running right by your feet. These clay pots will dissolve in that water. And if you follow, I remember doing this the first time in Vrindavan, if you follow the stream back around to the back of the kiosk, you'll find the potter there, scooping up the clay that has now dissolved in the water, putting it back on the spinning wheel, and making more pots. It's a very nice recycling that takes place in India. So I had to bring one of these back. It was so beautiful. The same is true for cooking. In India, they'll take whatever's left over, the rinds and peels after you've prepared food for dinner, and all of that gets fed to the cows and the goats, and they create dung. The dung is then scooped up and put into what are called gobar ovens. And in this gobar oven, natural methane gas rises from the bacterial interaction with the dung. The gas is then funneled through pipes back into the kitchen, where it is used for cooking. So this very, very nice system, a natural recycling that you'll see in India and no doubt elsewhere as well. But my vivid memories are from seeing this in India. It's something quite lovely that nothing goes to waste. Everything is respected as having a role to play, a place in God's creation. And it brought to mind the discussion that I had with my brother yesterday. Brian also has Zoom conferences with his students. And I say, so what do you talk about? You're a physicist. Does the discussion ever come round to, hey, Professor Green, how do you connect physics with COVID-19? I mean, is there ever some sense of bringing these things together the way we try to do it here in our gatherings, taking these ancient texts and seeing what is the relevance of these texts in the world today? And he said, yeah, my students, he teaches at Columbia. He says, my students are always asking things like, so given the rather tragic nature of what we're experiencing today, what can we expect of the world? Is this a cold and cruel creation that has no particular sense or purpose to it, and we just have to kind of suck it up and live with it? What can we anticipate from life? Now, Brian has his particular point of view, and we don't always agree on the purpose behind things, if indeed there is a purpose. But I would encourage you to join in that discussion. Let's go deeper in our explanation and our discussion of these verses and mantras from Isopanishad. So let's open this up for talks and see what are some of the things that have been on your mind lately, and see if we can't connect them to the beautiful teachings that we're finding in Isopanishad. You're welcome to ask a question, unmute your computer. Everyone and anyone is welcome to contribute to this discussion.
Hi Krishna, this is Brajarani. This verse to me is, I think you sort of meant this sort of the quintessential sort of environmental verse, but so much of the pain and anguish I feel like we see in this world comes from people and countries and individuals wanting more than their portion. And there's enough to go around, but there isn't enough to go around if we're greedy and wanting more than our portion, whether it's our toilet paper hoarding or fracking or et cetera, et cetera. But this seems to be sort of at the heart of it, is this desire to have more than we need.
Yeah, very true. There's a pervasive fear among people who have not had the benefit of we might call it a mystic training, or a training in the Vedic vision of how creation operates, a fear of scarcity, and a sense that if I don't look out for myself, who's going to look out for me? I have to provide for my family, I have to provide for myself, I have to provide for my community. And to an extent, there's nothing wrong with that. Ideally, the Vedic concept is that society is organized in such a way that there can be complementary, you might call them complementary self-interested groups. So it's not that you have to neglect self-interest, but by deriving an education about the nature of Purnam, Om Purnamada Purnamidam, everything that's needed will be provided to you. There's the story of one of the great acharyas of history, who I don't want to misquote which one it was, who was contemplating. His wife unfortunately died of a sickness, and he had a choice. He could stay with his family and continue to provide for them in the absence of his wife, who had been the one who was always looking out for things. Or he could trust that there is some greater plan and head out to fulfill his role as an older person now in being a teacher. And at that moment, he saw on a branch of a bush a little line of ants. And the ants were carrying leaves and little specks of food that had been left around. And at that moment, he realized, well, I guess if God can provide for the ants, and they're not having to make some big arrangement for it, why can I not also have some confidence, some comfort that I can take a chance? Things will work out. And he did and fulfilled. He became one of the great acharyas in the bhakti tradition. I think it's natural to have that fear, but it can be attenuated by coming to understand that there is this natural arrangement. Everything will be provided. And as it says in this first mantra, you don't need to take more than necessary because everything is being provided for you. Let me see. Did I bring that first mantra, the translation, up? I don't think I did. Let's see here. Go back here.
Go to screen share.
Okay, let me bring this up for you here. Everything animate or inanimate that is within the universe is controlled and owned by the Lord. One should therefore accept only those things necessary for himself, which are set aside as his quota. And one must not accept other things, knowing well to whom they belong. If you take more than your share, then you're denying someone else their share. It was a system also in the Middle Ages, I don't think, and still today in some regions. I think I saw this happening down in Florida. Farmers will leave, I forgot the technical word for this, they leave a certain portion of a harvest available for people to come and just take. In other words, you don't just take everything for yourself. Some portion of what you do should be left as, I know there's a technical word for this, I don't remember what it is. But there should always be, and the Vedic system was you can go into anyone's garden, into their fruit garden, vegetable garden, and take all the food you need for that moment, for that meal. What you can't do is fill up a big bag and take it home with you. So no one ever went hungry, but then no one ever hoarded either. So the balance has to be there. Thank you for that. We have some other comments here. Sam writes, this idea, though, doesn't suggest being passive, that things come without effort. Yes, corners of the field. Thank you, Sam. In the corners of the field are left for people to come and take if they're in need of food. yes, it doesn't mean that effort must not be made. Effort has to be made. But neither is over-endeavoring encouraged in the wisdom texts either. If you read the studies by Max Weber, an important sociologist from some time back, Weber describes that in the pre-modern days, people would only work 3 or 4 hours a day. They didn't work 12, 15, 18 hours a day. They worked a few hours a day, and the greater part of the day was left for community activity, for arts and creative expression, for prayer, for study. We've lost that. And I've had messages from a number of people saying, isn't it amazing that it took a pandemic to remind us how important it is just to take time off and cultivate our souls? I recommend to you all an article in this month's Atlantic magazine by Alan Lightman. Alan Lightman is a physicist. His most famous book is called Einstein's Dreams. Alan Lightman was one of my brother's physics professors when Brian was in college. Lightman chose a different path. He came to the realization when he was about 35 years old that I'm never going to be an Einstein. I'm not that smart. So let me move toward more of a literary expression. And he's done some wonderful books since then. This article in the Atlantic, I don't remember the title, is his remembrance at this current time, because we're all sequestered now, of how wonderful silence is, how wonderful downtime is, how wonderful it is to not have to always be running after things. I recommend that to you. A couple more questions here. Julie, who always has wonderful questions, says, is there an explanation then about why some people hoard? The same question that you posed just now. Is it part of human nature of a person unaware of his or her spiritual nature? Yeah, it is. If you don't realize that you're invincible, then you're always going to be afraid for your own well-being. If you don't understand the nature of Atma, the nature of consciousness, as something indestructible, immutable, always the same, never threatened by any external force, then there will be this fear of being hurt by others. Is there time for a quick story? I always ask to ask Anuradha for every. All right, here's a quick story. I was on a plane to Moscow. Some of you might have heard this. I told it at Jivamukti many years ago. Back in the 90s, I was going back and forth to Moscow doing animated films for the Disney Channel. And just at the time when Perestroika and Glasnost opened the doors of the former Soviet Union, it seemed that every church in America had taken up a collection and was sending someone over with a box of Bibles to go into the schools, to go into all the towns and cities and preach the good word. So I was on the plane going back to New York, and there were some fellows sitting in my part of the plane, and they happened to have had thick Southern accents, and they were talking about how many witnesses they'd made and how many Bibles they'd distributed. And I say, okay, well, that's fine. And as I was putting my gear in the overhead bin, they started telling these stupid homophobic jokes. Hey, how do you tell a gay in the shower in Moscow? Ha, ha, ha. I'm thinking to myself, I really hope I don't have to sit next to these people. Well, sure enough, my seat was right in the middle of them. And then I'm thinking, I hope I don't have to talk to them. And sure enough, 10 minutes into the flight, the guy next to me is served a snack tray, and he hands it to me and says, hey, you want my candy bar? And I looked at him and said, well, no, I don't want your candy bar, but got a question for you. How do you live with yourself? I said, what are you talking about? I said, well, you and your friends are, discussing spreading the good word in Russia and all the witnesses you made, all that's fine. But how does that fit with all of these stupid anti-gay jokes that you're telling? Where's the Christian charity in that? So I didn't know if this guy was going to haul off and hit me with his tray or whatever, but he got silent and then stayed that way for about 10 minutes. Then the plane takes off, and he turns to me and he says, let me tell you about myself. He says, I was born in a small town in Georgia, and my great-granddaddy was the founder of the local Ku Klux Klan chapter down there. And he says, I remember as a boy seeing black kids swinging from trees. And I was also a drunkard and a womanizer, and I was passed out on the floor of my cabin, and the local preacher came by, and he just sat there. He sat with me until I came to. And then he started talking to me about another way of existing, another way of being. And he really got to me. And he said, that was some years ago, and my life is different now. I'm not usually in Moscow. He said, I go to ghettos, places where I'll find kids doing drugs. He said, I was up in Harlem a few weeks back, and I don't carry a gun or anything, but I go up to where I see these kids dealing drugs, and I say, hey, listen, guys, you don't know me? Let me tell you a little bit about myself. And I tell them my story. And I remember being there in Harlem a month or so back, and we were crying together and hugging each other. And then he got very quiet and very thoughtful. And then he looked at me and he says, I know I've got a long way to go. Well, you could have bowled me over with a feather, because here I was judging this person for a bad joke. Me holier than thou, and ever since then, I've been very, very cautious to acknowledge that don't judge by appearances. So I'm still learning myself the lessons of Isopanishad, that you don't have to be defensive, you don't have to be judgmental. If you acknowledge the sanctity of the being in front of you, maybe there's some hope for the world. Anyway, I'm not quite sure why that came to mind, but I wanted to tell you that story.
Yadunath has his name.
Yadunath, where are you? You're in there somewhere. Where's Yadunath's question?
Hi, Haribo.
Oh, there you are.
Yeah. Thank you. That was an amazing story. Thank you so much. You're talking about the verse and taking as much as you need. So, but you will agree, wouldn't you, that we see people who don't have everything they need, have their basic needs aren't met, who apparently, even people of God, you might say, who don't have their basic needs. So how do we look upon that in light of what you're saying?
Are you asking, how do we justify hunger and want in a God-centered universe?
Well, I think I'm saying that we're talking about God will take care of us, so we don't have to worry about it. We don't have to hoard, because taking what I need today, because God will provide for tomorrow. But we do see people who are hungry and don't have what they need today or tomorrow. Mm-hmm. Right?
Okay.
So
well, that's an opportunity for service, isn't it? I mean, if we see someone in need, isn't that an opportunity to share what we have?
Does that jive with the philosophy that trust God, He will provide?
Well, this was what Sam was saying a moment ago. It doesn't mean that you don't make an effort. There's this, of course, is an old grand question. Is it faith or is it works? Do we just have to have faith and don't have to do anything because everything will be provided? Or do we have to work and things will be provided? And in India, this is often described as the baby monkey and the kitten metaphor. The baby monkey holds on to the mother's back. There's some work, there's some effort involved there. The baby kitten just sits passively waiting for the mother to pick her up by the scruff of her neck and carries her wherever she wants to go. So which is it? Do we have faith and everything will be provided, or do we make an effort and everything will be provided? So that's a debate that's been going on for a long time. I think the short form answer to your question is that there is suffering in the world. This is the material world after all. It's unavoidable. But how you respond to that is a function of how well you've understood Isopanishad and the other Sanskrit texts that can inform our vision of what's going on. If you look at the suffering in the world and that's all you see, then you have every reason to be an atheist. There's no reason for you to even consider that there's some kind of purposeful hand behind things. Because if that's true, that must be a very, very cruel Isha, cruel supreme being. How could such a supreme being allow the kind of pain and suffering that goes on in the world? So if all that you see is the pain and suffering, that's the only conclusion. So what Isopanishad is attempting to do is to encourage us, go deeper, refine your vision, deepen your vision of what's going on, and you'll see that there are dimensions to things that perhaps just your senses are unable to perceive. That alone that's a whole semester of discussion right there. So thank you for that. We're kind of running over here, so I have to apologize for that. Please join me in the Vaishnav Pranam. This is the way we end each of our sessions together. Vanchakalpa turubhyascha kripa sindhu patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Thank you all for being here. It's always a pleasure to have your company, even if for just a little while. And I hope to see you again tomorrow. Have a good evening, everybody.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu.